Have you ever wondered why you wake up in the middle of the night, your bladder about to explode, even though you think you did everything right before going to bed? There's something happening in silence, something that thousands of men repeat night after night, without realizing they're sabotaging their own bodies. I'm Dr. Ana Esperanza, urologist, and I've seen countless men suffering from this problem without ever knowing the real cause. Today, I'm going to reveal the silent habit that may be destroying your sleep and draining your energy bit by bit. But before I continue, type in the comments, "I want the hidden truth of the night." Stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to show you could transform your nights of sleep and bring back the energy you thought was gone. Since the beginning of time, men have carried the silent burden of not speaking about their weaknesses. Many would rather suffer in silence than admit that something isn't right with their body. Waking up at night to urinate is one of those hidden torments, so common that most treat it as an unavoidable part of aging. But is it really just that? The truth is that this condition, known as nocturia, affects nearly half of men over the age of 50. And while most immediately think of an enlarged prostate as if it were a biological destiny, there is something much darker hidden in the nightly routine. Picture a man who goes to bed at 11, exhausted from a long day of work, believing that at last he will have hours of uninterrupted rest. But like a cursed clock, 2 or 3 hours later, he wakes up with his bladder sounding the alarm. He stumbles through the darkness, crosses the room in silence, his body heavy, his mind clouded. He returns to bed, but sleep is no longer the same. The energy that should have been restored is broken, drained bit by bit, night after night. The cycle repeats itself like an invisible curse. What few realize is that this fragmentation of sleep not only erodes vitality, but it also opens the door to far more serious problems. Studies show that men with nocturia face greater risks of hormonal decline, chronic fatigue, and even cognitive deterioration. It's not just about urinating at night. It's about silently losing what defines masculine strength, energy, mental clarity, potency. And yet, when they consult a doctor, many receive only shallow explanations. It's your age. It's your prostate. But what if it isn't just that? Research published in urological journals shows that men who wake up more than twice a night to urinate have up to a 70% higher chance of developing severe sleep disorders, such as undiagnosed apnea, and they often present with sharply lower testosterone levels in the morning. This explains why so many report loss of sexual desire, exhaustion, and even difficulty concentrating on simple tasks. The body does not forgive repeated interruptions, and here lies the disturbing detail. There is a habit that many men carry as if it were normal, even healthy, but it acts like a slow poison on both the bladder and on sleep. This habit is so common that few would ever suspect it. It doesn't show up in medical tests. It's rarely discussed in consultations, and that's why it continues, repeated night after night, like a secret ritual. The most unsettling part is that this habit is often passed down from generation to generation, normalized by society, and even reinforced by advice that appears harmless. A man believes he is taking care of himself, when in reality, he is building his own nocturnal prison. Waking up multiple times to urinate then becomes the visible symptom of something much deeper. And this silent practice doesn't just affect the bladder. It triggers a chain reaction. The kidneys begin working at improper hours, hormonal balance is disrupted, and deep sleep, the stage responsible for restoring testosterone and renewing energy reserves, is violently interrupted. With each nightly awakening, the body becomes less efficient at producing the very hormones that sustain masculine vitality. It's as if masculinity itself were being drained away in the dark, little by little, without the man even realizing it. Many men, suffering from this problem, try to compensate during the day. They drink too much coffee, rely on energy drinks, and believe they can outsmart the body. But the body always collects its debt. That debt shows up as unexplained fatigue, lack of focus, diminished sexual desire, irritability. Over time, these men realize they no longer have the same strength, nor the same confidence, and all of it may be connected to something they themselves do every night, convinced that it's harmless. For some, the easiest explanation is to blame age. I'm getting older. It's natural. But is it? Or is that the perfect excuse to hide a habit that no one dares to question? Because if it were only about aging, why do men who are healthy, who exercise, who eat well, still suffer from broken nights? There is something darker behind this pattern, and it must be uncovered. And here's what's most unsettling. The male body sends signals before it completely breaks down. Frequent nightly awakenings are not just a nuisance. They are a silent scream that something is wrong. The prostate, bladder, and kidneys may carry part of the blame, but there is another piece of the puzzle that most prefer to ignore. Think of John, a 62-year-old man, disciplined, who walks daily and eats a balanced diet, yet he wakes up 3 times a night to urinate. At first, he thought it was just age. Later, when his wife began complaining about his constant trips to the bathroom and the fatigue that turned him into another man during the day, he finally sought medical help. The diagnosis: an enlarged prostate. But even after treatment, the problem persisted. John realized there was something deeper, something no one was explaining. This story could belong to anyone: a successful businessman, a rural worker, a retired teacher, all in silence, share the same nightly torment, and all have in common the repetition of a seemingly harmless habit, one that keeps corroding their sleep and draining their energy. Perhaps the cruelest irony is that this nightly ritual, considered harmless, is performed precisely at the time when the body most needs peace. It slips into routine like a quiet shadow, disguised as normality, but its consequences are devastating. Fragmented nights, drained energy, vitality in free fall. You might think you already know what this habit is. Maybe you imagine the easy explanations, like drinking too much liquid before bed or certain medications. But what if I told you that the true enemy is not just the prostate, but something you yourself do every single night, believing it to be harmless? The man who believes he knows his own body rarely admits when he has lost control of it. It is a silent pact many men carry, to appear strong, even when reality tells another story. Waking up in the middle of the night to urinate is not just a physical inconvenience. It is a cruel reminder that something within the male body is failing. The mind tries to justify it with simple excuses. It's just age. It's the prostate. But behind this apparent logic hides a far darker truth, a nightly habit that seems harmless, yet works as a silent executioner. Many men include this ritual in their routine, almost without thinking. An automatic gesture, so common it feels normal, even beneficial. Yet this very act traps the body in a vicious cycle of nightly awakenings. Each repetition sends contradictory orders: rest and work at the same time. The kidneys strain, the bladder becomes irritable, hormones fall out of balance, and in this invisible chaos, virility begins to fade. Science confirms it. Deep sleep is the engine that recharges testosterone and preserves a man's essential functions. When that sleep is broken again and again, the consequences go far beyond tiredness. The body loses strength, the mind grows foggy, sexual desire slowly fades away. And the most disturbing part is that the cause is not an outside disease, but an intimate gesture the man believes is protecting him. This is where Roberto's story comes in. He was 58 years old, disciplined, never smoked, careful with his diet, proud of his orderly lifestyle. Every night before bed, he repeated a small ritual he believed was essential to prevent problems and guarantee a restful night's sleep. To him, it was an act of care, a responsibility to his health. At first, it seemed to work. Roberto fell asleep peacefully, convinced he was doing the right thing. But after months, something changed. He began waking up during the night, first once, then twice, until it became 3 or more times each night. His sleep shattered. His mornings became unbearable. Work felt heavier. His concentration slipped away. And worse, his intimate life began to collapse. He sought medical help. Tests, diagnoses, prescriptions. Always the same response: it's normal for your age. It's the prostate. He was given medication, diet adjustments, but the torment continued. No one mentioned the obvious, that the very ritual he repeated faithfully each night was the true saboteur of his sleep. His wife noticed before he admitted it himself. "You're not the same anymore. No energy, no drive." Words like knives. Roberto, once proud of his strength, felt humiliated, trapped between shame and confusion. How could something so small cause so much damage? That is the perversity of this habit. It hides behind a mask of normality, acting slowly, night after night, until the man sees the truth too late. As months passed, the symptoms grew worse. It was no longer just fatigue. Strange muscle aches appeared, as though his body was aging at double speed. His memory began to fail. He forgot simple appointments. His physical appearance changed. The once firm, confident face became tired, hollowed. He began to avoid social gatherings, not from lack of interest, but because he knew he lacked the energy to keep up. In intimacy, the wound cut deepest. Sexual desire, once natural, vanished almost completely. The confidence he had always felt with his partner turned into insecurity. The man who had once been strong and reliable now saw himself as fragile, drained, incapable of meeting even his own expectations. Roberto is not alone. Thousands of men around the world share his experience. Some convince themselves it is an unavoidable punishment of age. Others keep silent, ashamed to appear weak. In anonymous forums, whispered conversations, the same stories repeat: broken nights, drained energy, relationships strained. And in every case, the common enemy is the same nightly ritual, repeated unconsciously like a prayer. This habit does not merely interrupt rest, it destroys the body's balance. Men who practice it report constant fatigue, irritability, memory loss. Some fall into anxiety. Others notice they are losing patience with their children or their spouse. What began as an innocent routine becomes an invisible chain, binding men to a life of exhaustion. The most disturbing part is that in medical consultations, this detail almost never comes up. The patient speaks of fatigue, of nightly awakenings, and receives superficial answers. In blood work, in reports, this gesture doesn't appear. It is invisible on paper, yet devastating in reality. Perhaps this is why specialists avoid mentioning it. How do you admit that such a trivial act can ruin a man's life? The body, trapped in this cycle, breaks down slowly. The bladder becomes hyperactive, the kidneys overloaded, hormone levels crash. Worse still, the brain becomes conditioned. Dependency sets in. The man believes he cannot sleep without this ritual. He convinces himself he needs it, when in fact it is the very thing destroying him. What began as prevention becomes punishment. What seemed like care reveals itself as poison. Virility, strength, confidence, all dissolve as the nights splinter apart. And the majority of men never connect the dots. They don't realize that this silent habit has been eating away at their vitality from within. Here lies the partial revelation. What is truly destroying the sleep of so many men is not just the prostate, nor aging. It is a repeated gesture, automatic, unquestioned. It is this habit that activates the bladder, that disrupts the kidneys, that sabotages hormone production. It is this that turns the night into a prison. But the worst part is yet to come. There is a hidden dimension to this nightly ritual, something still lurking in the shadows, so dark that even men who already suspect the problem fail to see it. And when it comes to light, the feeling is not just surprise, but horror, because it shows how masculinity itself can be corroded from within, while the man still believes he is protected. The modern man clings to the belief that he is in control of his body, his health, his destiny. It is this very confidence that blinds him to the truth. A nightly ritual he defends as harmless or even beneficial is the same ritual that is slowly dismantling him from the inside out. On the surface, it feels safe. He convinces himself it helps him relax, relieves tension, or ensures better rest. But this illusion of care is the perfect disguise for the poison hidden within. The comfort is false, and the longer it is repeated, the more destructive it becomes. When a habit offers immediate relief, it digs deep roots. A man clings to it, defends it, insists it is necessary. But the body never lies. The evidence piles up. Fractured sleep, drained mornings, dwindling desire, creeping irritability. And the cruelest irony? The very ritual he believes is protecting him is the one sabotaging his masculinity piece by piece. Doctors rarely confront it. They mask it with shallow explanations. It's just your age. It's only the prostate. These words may soothe the ego, but they do not explain why men in their 40s, and even men in their 30s, are waking multiple times per night, living in cycles of fatigue. No, the cause cannot simply be aging. The truth lies elsewhere. In a ritual that has been passed down quietly, normalized by culture, disguised as harmless, but devastating in its effect. The cost is not only physical. The erosion strikes at the core of identity. The man looks in the mirror and sees a stranger. The once sharp gaze now dull, the posture weakened, the body heavier, the energy drained. He no longer feels like himself. Masculinity is not only about strength or muscle, it is about vitality, clarity, confidence. Each night broken by awakenings is another slice cut away from his essence. Some men rationalize, "At least I'm looking after myself." Others keep silent, too ashamed to admit they are suffering. But all of them, in the privacy of their thoughts, whisper the same doubt. What if I'm wrong? What if this thing I repeat every night is the reason I'm falling apart? The body adapts in sinister ways. This habit does not simply disturb sleep, it rewires biology. The kidneys are pushed into overdrive when they should be resting. The bladder becomes hypersensitive, demanding attention at the worst possible times. Hormones fall out of rhythm like a broken metronome. And the brain, most treacherous of all, learns to anticipate it. Conditioned like a prisoner, the man's body awakens on cue, night after night, no matter how exhausted he is. Sleep is no longer natural. It is programmed and enslaved. The poison works slowly, so silently that it feels invisible. There are no sharp alarms, no sudden collapse, just a gradual unraveling, so subtle that by the time the man notices what he has lost, years of vitality have already been stolen. Those who try to stop the ritual discover the depth of its grip. Anxiety rises, insomnia gnaws, the body craves what has poisoned it. The habit becomes a dependency. The man convinces himself he cannot sleep without it, when in truth, it is the very reason his sleep has been destroyed. He becomes trapped in a paradox, locked in a prison he unknowingly built for himself. This silence is not accidental. Few doctors dare to expose the truth, because to do so would mean admitting that millions of men are harming themselves with a gesture so small, so ordinary, that it sounds ridiculous. But it is this very ordinariness that makes it so lethal. How do you tell a man that his masculinity is being corroded by something he thought was keeping him safe? Roberto discovered the truth too late. Carlos joked about his nightly awakenings until he could no longer climb stairs without losing his breath. Luis assumed his lost libido was andropause, never suspecting the ritual was the true thief. And then there is Peter, 47, who prided himself on staying fit, running daily, eating clean. But still, his nights were shattered, his mornings drained. He thought he was immune. He was wrong. Different men, different lives, the same chain. Science paints the bleak picture clearly. Repeated sleep fragmentation has been shown to reduce natural testosterone production by up to 25%. That is not just a number. It is the difference between a man who feels powerful in his own skin and one who drags himself through the day like a shadow of who he used to be. Less testosterone means less energy, reduced muscle, more fat around the abdomen, higher risk of diabetes, heart disease, depression. The ritual does not just wake men up at night, it accelerates their decline, carving years off their vitality. And so the haunting question emerges. Is there a point of no return? A hidden threshold, silent and invisible, that once crossed cannot be undone? Could masculinity itself, the confidence, the drive, the strength, be a fragile resource, eroded each night until one day it simply disappears? Most men do not want to hear the answer. They want to believe they are still in control, that they can stop any time, that the damage is reversible. But deep down they feel the truth pressing in. Once the line is crossed, there may be no way back. And what if I told you that this line exists, that there is a boundary, unseen but real, that waits silently in the dark? A limit that, once crossed, turns this ritual from a nuisance into a sentence. Not just broken sleep, but broken masculinity. Not just fatigue, but a collapse of the very essence of being a man. And what if that line is far closer than you think? We have now arrived at the point that most men never dare to face. Everything you've seen until now points to a single truth. It is not just age. It is not just the prostate. It is not chance. The true enemy hides in a nightly ritual, repeated without question, disguised as care, yet working as a silent poison. The forbidden habit that steals the sleep of so many men is the excess of liquids before bed. A gesture praised as healthy, but in reality, the chain that activates the bladder, overburdens the kidneys, and rips apart the body's chance to restore vitality. This is not just about a glass of water, it's about a pattern, repeated night after night, ingrained as if it were necessary, when it is the very source of destruction. Behind this false sense of self-care, the body breaks. The bladder is forced to work at the very hour it should rest. The kidneys are drained. Hormones collapse out of balance. And the most vital stage of the night, the deep sleep that renews testosterone, strength, and desire, is shattered. Each awakening carves away at manhood, leaving less and less behind. At first it seems harmless. A little fatigue here, a little less energy there. But over months, over years, the debt grows unbearable. The man looks in the mirror and sees someone unrecognizable, the fire in his eyes gone, his posture weakened, his energy nowhere to be found. Masculinity itself eroded, not by an enemy outside, but by a habit inside his own home, inside his own routine. The truth is uncomfortable. That is why so few speak it out loud. To admit that something so small, so ordinary can dismantle male vitality is to admit that men themselves are often the architects of their own downfall. But now you know. Now you have seen the face of the real enemy. The choice is in your hands. You can keep pretending it is just age, just the prostate, just fate. Or you can face the truth, break the ritual, and reclaim the energy that has been stolen from you, night after night. If you've made it this far, it means you had the courage to confront this taboo. Prove it. Leave a comment with the phrase, "I will no longer be a prisoner of the night." That is how I will know who is truly ready to break free from this silent chain. And don't stop here. Subscribe to this channel, because in the videos to come, I will reveal more hidden truths, secrets the medical world prefers to keep quiet, truths that could mean the difference between merely surviving or regaining the strength, vitality, and drive you thought were gone forever. Remember, the most dangerous enemy is not always outside. Sometimes, it lives inside your own habits, disguised as care, waiting silently to consume you in the dark.